You were a little more free to experiment in those ways without fear of like getting killed, right, as an example, or, becoming a felon at the age of 14 for possessing a little bit of marijuana, right? The police were kind of in that same thing. They're like, wait till I tell your parents. Right? It was more of that than it was the strong arm of the law coming down on a 14-year-old for underage drinking. I'll show them by ruining their life. Right there, there wasn't a lot of that. It was a really good sense of community, I guess, is what I'm saying there. A lot of people looking out for everybody. But with some of the negative side of that small town thing is that, you could be just about anything in a small town except for, yep, you guessed it, except for different. Like different was viewed as bad, especially if you were different in and around the sense of maybe being not so straight. We'll just say not so straight at this point. How about that? So you could be pretty much anything, but not so straight was not an acceptable answer. If you dress different, like not an acceptable answer. If you listen to music that didn't really jive. Like there was really kind of that sense of like the rock and roll's poisoning the kids. There was a lot of kind of feelings of that kind of as I was kind of growing up. But setting in that really kind of religious upbringing, setting in that church, right? I heard a lot of those things that most folks that have a similar experience heard, right? That if you were, I'll just use this term, homosexual. If you were homosexual, then God didn't love you and you were going to hell, right? It was just that simple. That was blasphemy against God, and you would pay the ultimate price by spending an eternity in hell. I'd shared back on the Really Fucking Scary Stories podcast when I had my friend Ian Allison on. We were talking about like Halloween stuff, and I think this is just a really good example, is that like I remember like Halloween wasn't to be celebrated, right? Because it was a pagan devil holiday. So what they would do is church would kind of do Halloween with like a different name. Like they would call it trunk or treating, or they would have a, one of the more popular churches. They're kind of, I guess, more of a mega church for that area. Had something that they called Hell House, which is basically where they brought kids through a haunted house. It's just a haunted house with really good, and I'll give them credit where credit's due. Props here, mad props. They did some like serious makeup and serious special effects. It was like a legit haunted house. But basically what they did is instead of being like a haunted house with like ghouls and goblins, kind of like what you normally think are ghostesses, like what we talk about over on the Really Fucking Scary Stories podcast, they basically paraded you through, hell. They took you through hell. And each one of these different scenes, right? Each one of these different scenes was someone that had broke God's law, and now they found themselves in hell, and they were basically pleading with you, right, to not do what they did. Like I remember the one that really stood out to me that was really just fucked your head when you're like 12, was this lady, and she's like covered in blood, and she's holding like a baby doll that's covered in blood, and she's basically saying that when I was 16, I had an abortion, and that's why I'm here. And she's basically holding this dead baby in her hand. It was just awful. And they had other ones that dealt with all of those things, from homosexuality to abortion to using the Lord's name in vain. That was a big one that they really, really churned out there in the Hell House thing, right? But that was like it, right? That was like a really common thing, like was to basically scare kids into following what those folks believed to be the one true word, like the one true law, right? So you're sitting there and I just thought that was a really good example, but just you're sitting there and you're hearing this, like, so all through like my formative years, from like as long as I can remember until I kind of got to the point of being a rebellious shithead, I was constantly hearing like, don't be gay. God hates gay people and you're going to burn in hell. So when that's beating you enough at a young age, you truly believe that, right? Like you truly believe that, okay, if I'm different, then that's bad. Well, lo and behold, like I get to like middle school age, or like kind of the age when like, you're starting to like discover yourself and discover parts of yourself. You're starting to figure out, about the time, the best way I probably describe it is about the time that like, you start to, in more straight setting, you start to notice the opposite sex, right? Like boys start to notice girls and girls start to notice boys. That kind of dynamic changes from like boys getting picked on by girls to like boys and girls being attracted to one another and going, oh, that's something I might be interested in. So when that started to happen, my experience was a little different than those that were around me. I didn't really notice girls at all, like not in that way, right? Like not in that way. I was like, I noticed boys, right? I noticed boys, and I was like, oh, well, he looks very nice. I like that. Right? I like the way he looks. He's very, wow. Right. So my experience was instantly different. Dealing with that, could be in the way that you imagine. It was just instantly suppressed. So at that age, I didn't know what that was, right? I was just like, well, that's strange. I better like girls, right? I didn't really think about it from like the sense of being gay. I didn't think about it from the sense of actually being attracted to boys at the time, men, right? I just chalked it up to like, okay, whatever that is, right? So as you continue to kind of like grow, you kind of mature, you're going through puberty, right? Those feelings just got more and more and more intense. So what do you do, right? What do you do in that situation, right? You wonder, what the fuck do you do in that situation? You're kind of in that situation where you're going, okay, like, I'm going to hell. Like, this is horrible. Like, I'm going to hell, right? You find yourself being attracted to the same sex, and then you instantly feel horrible, horrific shame and fear, and it's just not good. So what you do is you cover, and you cover deeply, right? And this is pretty common. It still happens quite a bit today, especially in those areas that might be, or just not even areas. I don't even want to chalk it up to areas. Again, I'm not trying to beat that area up. I think just with people that might be a little bit more closed-minded when it comes to that. And again, not to pick on religion in particular, but it does have kind of a track record there, right? Has a little bit of a track record. So you kind of instantly force yourself to go, no. Okay, what do I do? Get a girlfriend, right? So that's what I did. Like, I got a girlfriend, and then like that didn't work. I go, get another one. That didn't work. Get another one. That didn't work. Get another one. That didn't work. Get another one. So you're constantly going through this thing of like ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs. And all along, so for me at the time, there was like, back in the day, right? This was way before like dating apps and stuff. Like, I had like a slick Nokia flip phone, so I couldn't even browse the internet on my phone. But you go on and you find like forums, and you find like stuff like Craigslist and things like that. And you connect with guys, right? And you chat with them, and then you chicken out, and you don't actually do anything. And then you quickly run back and get a girlfriend, right? And it's just that, because there's that constant fear of going to hell. And worse than going to hell is getting caught, right? Because if you get caught, you're different, you're shamed, it's horrible. So that cycle went on and on and on and on, all the way through high school, right? Like even into, so at the point that I'm in high school, right? So that's when I kind of find out that this is for serial, like this is for serious, right? And so I experiment, right? I started experimenting. But then as soon as you experiment, again, instant shame. You feel like the worst person in the world because of what you've been taught, right? You've been taught that you're going to hell. You're sinning in the eyes of God. You're an abomination to God. This is blasphemy, right? This is horrible. So then you quickly recover by, again, doubling down on your cover, doubling down on your straightness, right? And getting another girlfriend. So this vicious cycle was like just on repeat, just over and over and over and over, all the way up until the point to where, eventually, trying like hell, because you're going to bed going, God, just make me straight. God, just make me straight. Just make me straight. Just make me straight. And so you're constantly experimenting kind of on both fronts, right? And you know what you want, but you're experimenting, trying to force yourself to like maybe what you don't want, right? And then eventually through repetition, something eventually goes awry. And I don't mean awry in a bad way, because it was actually one of the biggest blessings of my entire life. Through this process, once I'm well out of high school, couple years out of high school, or a year or so out of high school, I end up again in a relationship with a female, doing the normal thing, trying to be as straight as I possibly can, all while trying to suppress these thoughts. And through repetitive action, that female eventually becomes pregnant, and I'm blessed with a daughter. So I will say that I want to make sure that this comes across, that is one of the biggest blessings of my entire life. And I wouldn't trade any of that, like depression and anxiety and that horrible repetitive cycle for anything, because of the gift that it gave me of having a daughter. So let me put that out there. I think that's really important to say. But so at that point, I'm going ham. Like I'm going ham on trying to be straight, right? Going like super, super ham on trying to be straight. So, she's pregnant. Good Southern gentleman here. Of course, what do? You get married. So we get married. And then of course, what happens? The gay doesn't go away, right? It doesn't go away. So obviously a few years into that, I'm like, listen, can't do this. And straight up honest, right? And like, it just got to the point And I will explain how it got to that point in just a second. But it just got to the point where, like, I can't do this. It's not you. You're an awesome person. I love you as a person, but I cannot do this. Like, it's just not going to work, because I'd gotten to the point. Here's the why. I'd gotten to the point where I was so absolutely depressed, crippled with depression, to the point in which I couldn't even get out of bed some days. Like, it was horrible. Like, so much just depression and anxiety, and just so tired of having to wear a mask for my entire life. And every single day in my relationship, every single day in the relationship with my family and with my friends, having to take out a significant portion of who I was and live without that portion of who I was for, at this point, 24, 25 years of my being, right? Now, fortunately, this person shall remain nameless. We went through that whole process of divorce. It was actually super easy because, it's not like I hate you, you hate me. It was just kind of like, this is kind of how this is. And, we have a daughter and we have to make this work. And we're still super duper good friends to this day, which is amazing, right? Most people kind of hear that story and go, you guys must hate each other. But no, like, we have an amazing relationship, right? But so that was the start of me coming out. And so coming out was that much harder because not to kind of like label myself or label others, but I'm a pretty masculine guy. Like, I'm not to stereotype, but I'm not the person that you would kind of look at and just go like, oh, definitely gay dude, right? And not saying you should label people, not saying that you rely on stereotypes. That's kind of an asshole thing to do. But I wouldn't be the person that you would probably pick out of a lineup. I guess would be the most offensive way to say that. But so that made that process a little bit harder. And I remember even being envious at different points in my life of folks that were a little bit more obvious. And again, that sounds bad, but those folks, it just seemed, it wasn't easier. Don't get me wrong. Looking back on it now, I know that it wasn't easier. It was probably just as difficult, if not harder. But I was looking at it going, well, at least people could probably like guess. Because every time that I would have the talk with somebody, it would be like pure shock, right? It'd be like, what? No, there's no way. There's no way. I remember you from high school. You were the ladies' man, right? And I'm like, yeah, because I go ham on everything. Like in that point, like I thought that like I had to go like super ham, because if I didn't go super ham, guess what was going to happen? Like I was going to be outed as something other than straight, to be something different, and my life would have been over, right? Or even not as bad, but I was going to go to hell, like kind of all that sort of stuff, right? So I started the process, and obviously with the person I was in a relationship at first, and I'll just say that there was some kind of conversation beforehand. There was some idea, right? That was probably the least shocking one, as wild as that sounds, but that was the least shocking one. Telling like friends and family, that was probably more of the shock, right, for them. They're like, no, there's no way, right? Most were honestly pretty accepting, which was kind of what blew my mind. There was a couple that were like, okay, we're not friends anymore. God says that's bad, so we're not friends anymore. And then like they'll block you on social media, and they're like, I don't want the gay to rub off on me through Facebook or something, but. The really tough one for me was when I came out to my mom, because my mom and I have always had a really like special relationship. Okay, remember mom, aka grandma. My dad had already passed away, right? So that's probably one of the biggest regrets that I have, is not getting to tell him who I truly was. I kind of think back about it, and knowing my dad, knowing his kind of perception, knowing kind of his ability to like know people and read people, like I've got a feeling that he probably knew something, right? I've got a feeling that he probably knew something. But so I told my mom, and that totally caught her way off guard. And she's like, no, you're not, whatever. Right. And then so a couple of days of like the no, you're not, whatever denial thing turned into like horrible like argument. And then that kind of boiled down into, okay, we just didn't talk for a few years. And that's super sad. Like, again, super sad. Don't judge her. But it was sad, and it did suck. I lost a few years of relationship with my mom, which was significant for me because, again, super close. Like growing up, me and her were always connected at the hip. And now all of a sudden, because of of me finally revealing who I was, that, our relationship was not allowed to be. And it was not allowed to be, in her words, because of God, right? Because of God, which wasn't good, right? So it wasn't good. There's a few years of kind of this awkward silence, like not talking at all, right? Like not talking at all, until one day we just kind of decided and I guess, more on her part, but on my part as well, I had to forgive.